Good evening. I will jump straight into this, given the time. On 8 May 1945, people in Winnipeg woke up to the news that Germans had surrendered and the war in Europe was over. For most, the long years of worry about their children and siblings, nephews and cousins, and fiancés and spouses were at an end. However, most is not all. The war in Asia was not yet over. Canadians were still fighting against the Japanese, their fates not yet decided. Further, as the fighting ended in Europe and thoughts turned to repatriation, plans were afoot to send Canadian aviators, soldiers, and sailors into the final battles against Japan. On 1 September 1939, the Royal Canadian Air Force had 6 full-time permanent active Air Force squadrons and 6 auxiliary active Air Force squadrons manned by part-time volunteer officers and airmen. The auxiliary squadrons formed a cadre of trained personnel to augment the full-time Air Force in the case of war. In 1939, the RCF comprised barely 4,000 personnel. Established as number 12 Army Cooperation Squadron in 1932 and renamed number 112 Army Cooperation Squadron in 1937, in September 1939, the squadron operated the Westland Lysander at Richardson Field. With the declaration of war, the squadron stepped up recruitment and training of air and ground crew. In February 1940, when 110 Squadron was dispatched to Great Britain, 112 Squadron, generously christened the City of Winnipeg Squadron by the mayor, departed Winnipeg for Ottawa. With the German attack into Belgium and France in May came increased urgency for reinforcements for the RAF. So at the end of May 1940, the lead elements of 112 Squadron found themselves on a boat to Great Britain. The remainder of the squadron and its equipment departed a couple of weeks later. With the vanguard of the RCF deployed overseas, the RCF headquarters confronted its need for air and ground crew for wartime service. While 110 and 112 Squadron were mobilizing during the fall of 1939, the British Air Ministry was looking to the Dominions to help them meet their manpower requirements. Training air crew was a lengthy process, especially for pilots, and the skies over Great Britain were perilous given the threat posed by the German Luftwaffe. At the same time, Canada's Prime Minister, Mackenzie King, was determined to avoid the threats to national unity that attended conscription during the First World War. He was looking for a way to minimize Canada's commitment of troops to combat operations. The RCF's need for aircrew and the safe, wide-open airspace over Canada offered the perfect solution. In December 1939, Canada agreed to host the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. Personnel and experts were mobilized in an unprecedented manner to build and operate more than 100 schools, employing over 100,000 Canadians across the country. By the end of the war, 131,000 Commonwealth and Allied aircrew completed their training in Canada. However, before anyone could be trained, Canada first had to create what President Roosevelt christened the Aerodrome of Democracy. To manage the training effort, 4 regional headquarters were established across Canada. Winnipeg hosted number 2 Training Command, headquartered initially in the commercial building before it expanded and spread to the Lindsay Building on Notre Dame Avenue. At the height of the BCATP operations, number 2 Training Command was responsible for more than 30 units located at 12 primary BCATP sites and 14 satellite airfields spread from Thunder Bay to North Battleford, Saskatchewan. Number 2 Training Command headquarters was well placed to coordinate support for the BCATP from the local commercial air sector. In 1939, Winnipeg was already an important transfer and maintenance point for north, east-west, and north-south flights, and an important point of departure for flights into remote northern communities. Winnipeg was a keynote in airmail routes and air freight services, while passenger services were just getting started. Stevenson Field was already one of Canada's busiest airports, with modern hangars and repair shops, and state-of-the-art radio navigation and weather forecasting services. In 1939, Stevenson Airfield hosted operations by commercial airlines, bush pilot operations, and charter carriers serving northern Manitoba and Ontario and the Northwest Territories. In 1937, Trans-Canada Airlines chose Winnipeg as its operational headquarters. Stevenson Field provided a base for dispatch, scheduling, and maintenance operations. In 1939, Trans-Canada Airlines began passenger service flights through Stevenson Field. During the war, TCA operated the Canadian government transatlantic air service, which provided flights across the Atlantic for the government in support of the Canadian government. Many staff and pilots joined the RCF, while other staff maintained critical navigation, radio, and weather services in Canada. In 1942, Canadian Pacific Airways consolidated a number of small bush airlines into a single large carrier, including Winnipeg-based Canadian Airlines Limited, Starrat Airways, and Wings Limited. Canadian Pacific Airways supported the war effort by servicing BCATP fields and ferrying personnel. Given the urgent demand for trained pilots and its lacking training capacity, the RCF turned to civilian aviation companies and flying schools to train military aviators. Several organizations in Winnipeg provided a source of trained instructors. Trans-Canada Airways already trained pilots, radio operators, and maintenance crews in Winnipeg. The Winnipeg Flying Club provided facilities, instructors, and aircraft to support the training of military personnel in Portage la Prairie and Brandon. And the Johannesson Flying Service provided flight instruction to 231 Icelandic students so they could enlist as aircrew in the RCAF. Winnipeg hosted two specialist James and Winnipeg Air Observer School Limited was formed by two commercial aviation firms to run it, Wings Limited and Starrat Airways. The school taught air navigation, aerial photography, reconnaissance, observation, mapping, and target description, using commercially owned and maintained civilian-flown Avro Ansons assembled at the nearby MacDonald aircraft plant. Number 3 Wireless School opened in the Manitoba School for the Deaf on Shaftesbury Avenue in February 1941 to train wireless air gunners and ground signal officers. When Number 5 AOS moved to larger facilities west of Stevenson Field in 1943, Number 3 Wireless School moved to its former Ellis Avenue location. Of course, whenever you have aircraft, you have a need for aircraft maintenance, repair, and overhaul services. Stevenson Field hosted a variety of companies, large and small, that assembled, maintained, and repaired aircraft and aircraft parts during the war. McDonnell Brothers Aircraft Limited assembled Mark II and Mark V variants of the twin-engine Anson aircraft under license from A.V. Rowan Company. Midwest Aircraft Limited provided aircraft repair services. S&S Aircraft Limited manufactured and refurbished wooden propellers that were used on the training aircraft of the BCATP, such as the Avro Anson. And Standard Machine Works overhauled thousands of piston engines. Winnipeg hosted two important RCF logistics facilities during the war, both built by Bird Construction Company. Number 7 Supply Depot on Notre Dame Avenue managed millions of aircraft parts. Number 8 Repair Depot, adjacent to Stevenson Field in St. James. When operating at full capacity, the depot turned out more work per individual than any other repair depot in Canada. The first class of pilots to pass through the BCATP graduated in November 1940. In December, 10 of those pilots were assigned to 112 Squadron, which had just days before been renamed Number 2 Canadian Squadron, and was being re-equipped with a single-seat Hawker Hurricane fighter. Those 10 included 2 future squadron commanders. On 1 March 1941, Number 2 Canadian Squadron was renamed Number 402 Squadron and declared operational on the Hurricane. For the next 3 years, 402 Squadron flew defensive counter-air operations in the skies over England and the English Channel and the North Sea, and offensive counter-air operations against the Luftwaffe over northern France and Belgium. In 1942, the squadron converted to the Spitfire for the rest of the war. 402 Squadron provided air cover for the troops in Normandy on and after D-Day. In August 1944, it was assigned to Operation Doodlebug, during which the squadron intercepted 5 German V-1 buzz bombs over southern England. In October 1944, they joined 26th Wing of the 2nd Tactical Air Force in France. For the rest of the war, the squadron supported the advance of the Allies across France, Belgium, and Holland into Germany. On the 8th of May 1945, 402 Squadron was based at a captured enemy airfield in northern Germany. In July, the squadron was disbanded and its members began the repatriation to Canada. Winnipeg entered the Second World War with a vibrant and growing. In 1945, that sector had grown to a level of national importance that still thrives in 2025. Trans-Canada Airways became Air Canada, the major international air carrier we all know and love, in 1965. McDonnell Brothers Aircraft is now known as Magellan Aerospace, a major player in Canada's aerospace, defense, and space industries. Standard Aero Engines Limited, known today as Standard Aero, is one of the largest independent aerospace maintenance, repair, and overhaul companies in the world. It employs thousands of skilled technicians who work on engines for regional airlines, business aviation, helicopters, and military fleets. Winnipeg and other communities across the province hosted hundreds of BCATP staff and students who had money to spend and were looking for ways to spend it. Local communities set up entertainment centers, organized recreational activities, invited the trainees into their homes. BCATP schools ran sports days, concerts, and wartime fundraising drives. Inevitably, the relationships would develop between service personnel and local citizens. Quick engagements and short notice weddings were frequent because of overseas deployments, leave schedules, and the emotional pressures of war. The impact of the economic loss attending the closeout of the BCATP and ending its supporting activities in March 1945 was challenging for communities large and small. These were offset by the prospect of service personnel returning from overseas, some with new war brides in tow, looking to start their post-war lives in Manitoba. Despite the end of military contracts, aviation firms in Winnipeg and across the country benefited from the growing demand for civilian air services and an influx of trained aircraft technicians and aircrew when they were demobilized by the RCAF. The Second World War established Winnipeg as the center of gravity for technical and administrative training for the RCAF. Today, 17 Wing hosts 2 Canadian Air Division, which is responsible for all individual training for the RCAF. In the 1990s, 1 Canadian Air Division moved to 17 Wing and today serves as the operational headquarters for the RCAF. It is responsible for all air operations in Canada and overseas. And of course, 402 Squadron is still based in Winnipeg, where it supports aircrew training with a mixed regular and reserve workforce. The people of Winnipeg have every right to be proud about their contribution to the war effort from 1939 to 1945, at home and overseas. Many stepped up to lead elements of the BCATP, while others served with distinction against the enemy in the skies of Europe and Asia. Some demonstrated outstanding leadership and courage in the execution of their mission. I would like to honor just a few. William Bill Martin, who was one of the most decorated Canadians to serve with the Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm. John Alexander Kent obtained his private pilot license at the Winnipeg Flying Club at the age of 17 under the instruction of Conrad Connie Johansson. He joined the RAF in 1935 and it distinguished himself as a test pilot and received honors for his leadership of 303 Squadron in combat during the Battle of Britain. Valence Heath Patriarch joined 112 Squadron in 1932, while he worked for Spence McDonald Air Transport Limited and Canadian Airways Limited. During the war, he served in training and command duties in Canada and overseas, and continued his service until 1961. Ernest Hutchinson Glenn Moncrief joined 112 Squadron in 1933. During the war, he served with distinction in training roles in Canada and leading fighter operations against Germany. After the war, he served as president of Standard Aero Engine Limited for 25 years. Norman Hobson Bretz was the only pilot from Winnipeg to command 402 Squadron, which he did with distinction over Dieppe on 19 August 1942. He returned to Canada in March 1943 to serve in instructional and command duties until the end of the war. And David Murray Peden was a bomber pilot instructor during the war. His memoir is highly regarded for the visceral depiction of bomber operations, and that memoir is called A Thousand Shall Fall. After the war, he had a successful career as a lawyer in Winnipeg. Of course, not everyone from Winnipeg who put up their hand to serve God and country returned. According to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission database, 1,250 of Canada's war dead had next of kin, usually parents or spouses, who lived in Winnipeg. Of those, 595 were aviators, including 561 who served in the RCAF. A further six Australians married local women while they were in Manitoba as participants in the RPCATP. While 14 more had joined the Royal Air Force. Many, many more aircrew came home bearing wounds to body and mind. I would like to close this presentation by honoring a representative selection of Winnipeg's lost aviators. George Horace Yeelan perished on 1 December 1939 when his Blenheim crashed in Scotland in poor weather during a mission with 141 Squadron. He was the first Winnipegger killed in action during the Second World War. John Benzie was killed in action on 7 September 1940 when his Hurricane was shot down over London while serving with the all-Canadian number 242 Squadron. He was one of two born in Winnipeg pilots shot down during the Battle of Britain. Norman Stein died in a Winnipeg hospital on 31 January 1941 from natural causes while awaiting discharge. At the time, he was serving as an airframe technician with No. 2 Service Flying Training School near Ottawa. James Andrew Ringer died during training on 9 June 1944 when his Bolingbroke aircraft crashed while assigned to No. 10 Bombing and Gunnery School on Prince Edward Island. Donald David Charles Stewart was killed in action on 4 July 1944 when his Halifax failed to return from a mission to Hungary with No. 148 Special Duty Squadron. He had apprenticed at McDonald Brothers Aircraft Limited before he enlisted. And finally, John Lawson McBride died on 7 August 1945 when his aircraft was hit by Japanese ground fire during a mission with 356 Squadron over Sumatra. He was the last born in Winnipeg aviator killed in action during the Second World War. During the Second World War, the people of Winnipeg stepped up to support the war effort in myriad ways, material, financial, and emotional. They sent their children to the fight. They built, maintained, and repaired the tools of war, and they welcomed thousands of strangers to their city and into their lives. In the skies over Europe and Asia, born in Manitoba, aviators served with honor and courage. At home in Canada, they contributed to the evolution of Winnipeg as an important hub for the RCF for civilian aviation. After the Americans dropped atomic bombs on Japan in August 1945, the need for Canada to dispatch armed forces to fight the final battles against Japan went away. With the signing of the Instruments of Surrender in Tokyo Bay on 2 September 1945, all thoughts returned to the repatriation of our aviators, soldiers, and sailors abroad, and the return to peace. Thank you.